Willkommen, this is Julia.
And this is Shane. And this is Think Plant-Based. Think Plant-Based. Make sure to check out recipes, health tips, travel tips at www.thinkplantbased.com.
And we're officially on iTunes, so please rate and write us a review on iTunes.
Write us a review. Give us 2 stars, 3 stars, maybe 5 stars. Let us know.
For sure, 5.
Yeah, I mean, who would give us 2 stars anyways, right? But yeah, make sure to do that because that's how we get found.
Looking for amazing vegan vitamins?
Hate swallowing pills like I do?
Try Herbaland Gummies.
Get 15% off all orders when using discount code ThinkPlantBased15 at checkout.
Make sure to head over to herbaland.com. That is herbaland.com. Today's show, we have Dr. Ernie Ward, a plant-based veterinarian. Welcome to our show.
Ernie, good morning.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing. You're making such a positive impact on the planet, and you're helping out animals and people. So I'm really honored and thrilled to be with you today.
Oh, thank you so much. Likewise, we're so excited. I've never actually met a plant-based veterinarian. And when I heard about you, and I saw what's Shark Tank, right?
Yeah.
Is it the American show? Mm-hmm. We saw one of your guys, right? They were presenting the dog food, and that was really impressive what you guys are doing. And please tell the listeners more about yourself.
Yeah.
Well, I'm, as you mentioned, a veterinarian. I've been in practice nearly 30 years now, so that's quite an accomplishment in and of itself. I've been plant-based, vegetarian and vegan since the mid-1980s. I've also done a wide variety of ultra-endurance events, including multiple Ironmans. So I can tell you firsthand that you can live a long, prosperous, and healthy life on a plant-based diet. You don't need to kill animals to survive and thrive. So kind of get that out of the way. But you're right. It is a bit of an unusual situation when, veterinarians who we dedicate our lives to serving animals, and yet the vast majority, eat animals, continue to kill them for consumption. And I think, one of my things, especially this last part of my career, is to really try to impress upon my colleagues that we should be looking at this more carefully. We should be critiquing our actions on the world around us. And, with today's technological advances, including like our wild earth dog food, just using innovative protein sources, do we need to rely on the old animal-based foods for good health? And of course, the research is clear on this. You've had innumerable guests on your podcast and show, who expound upon that. But, again, my question is, if we've dedicated our lives to serving and protecting and, trying to avoid any harm, why do we continue to support factory farming, for example? And I understand they object to that terminology, but let's call it what it is. These are highly efficient, mechanized farming operations. All of my family, incidentally, Jane and Julia, were farmers. I mean, my father and mother were the only two who, quote unquote, escaped the farm. And so, I'm deeply embedded in this in the South of the United States. So I know farming. I know what goes on. I know there are plenty of good farmers, but I also know that the farming that we see today in 2020 is vastly different than when I was growing up as a child in the 1970s. And so, we got to own it. We got to try to make it better. And I think, again, as a profession and as people and as colleagues like yourself, we can make a difference.
We can, right? I mean, we think more for ourselves. Oh, yeah, being plant-based, we can do it. But some people actually feel bad about making their dogs or cats vegan, especially cats, right? They're more like, that's kind of torture because in nature they eat meat, right? But it's not like that they eat wild caught like meat, right? They get the factory farm meats usually, right? What is it, like the leftovers of slaughterhouses, right? Are all mixed into the food. Like the pet food. Think of it.
Right. And that's one element. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things I try to dispel, and in the book, you've mentioned 2 things that I've sort of named over the past decade or so of writing and researching on these topics. And the first is what you said, people feel uncomfortable, like it's somehow harming their cat. And I call this in our book too, which I encourage people to go out and read if they want to know more. Nice. Shameless plug, but the Clean Pet Food Revolution. I mean, this is, if you are plant-based in your life and you have pets, you should definitely check this out. It's really, I mean, it's incredibly well researched. I'm very, very proud of that book. But this feeling that we're somehow not doing the right thing by them, I call it ethical feeding friction. So now let's already say that you're a vegan or vegetarian, or you're somehow on this plant-based journey along with us. And you're opening up that can of cat food, and you know that inside that can is a dead animal, right? Or byproducts, or whatever we want to call that. And so you feel that friction, right? That feeding friction, the ethics of it start to confound and confuse you, and you don't know what to do. And so most people just dismiss it. They just sort of put it aside and go about their business, say, it sucks, but that's what I have to do. But then there are people like us and others that are saying, well, we can innovate. So the ethical feeding friction is real. If you're watching this today or listening to this wherever you are, and you do have that little moment of unsettling, when you open that bag or that can, remember that there are lots of people like you, and we are rapidly bringing solutions on board. For dogs, we have this very well settled. The research is very, very clear. Dogs are omnivores, although I'll get to in a second why I hate that term and why I think it's irrelevant. But, cats are a little bit trickier, and we are doing some active research, and I would say expect solutions sooner than later. But then the other part of this that I think we have to be careful about is us assuming that our dogs and cats are in any way directly linked to their primal ancestors, right? I mean, to think of your dog as a wolf, not only is it incorrect scientifically and from the genetic records and proof, but, when we think about our cats as being hunters in the wild, it's true, but we've domesticated them for thousands of years, taken away a lot of those abilities, So, I mean, if my cat, itty bitty kitty, had to go out and fend for herself, I'm afraid she'd be knocking on my door after a couple of days, okay? So we have to be aware that we've changed them significantly, both genetically, behaviorally, and certainly, with their nutritional needs. And so when we look at the genetics of the genome, if you will, of dogs and cats, we've seen significant what we call genetic drift. So if you look at wolves and you look at today's domestic dog, whatever breed it may be, there are significant differences in starch metabolism, for example. And we're just now starting to uncover this with cats, but we're starting to see that domestic cats have significant differences in the genes that allow them to digest many starches and carbohydrates. So they're not exactly like the tiger that we think about in Africa. Now, it's true, they all share a lineage, but it's sort of like looking at our own evolutionary tree. I mean, we share many genetic traits. 99% of our genome is that of a chimpanzee, but yet we're dramatically different, right? So, I mean, we have to understand that these subtle shifts in genes can have profound impact on how we appear and act and live and eat. So I want to touch on that. The other thing, too, is just to be cautious about the framework that you're somehow, and you said the word torturing our cats, right? Because they're supposed to be eating. And when we frame it like this for the rest of the world, we actually then lend into a narrative that supports that we're somehow depriving our cat. And that's just not how nutrition and health works, right? So at the end of the day, the other thing I want to touch on is that ingredients are simply nutrient vessels. So see, your body doesn't care where it gets those amino acids, those fats, those minerals, those vitamins, whatever nutrients that you need. It just cares that you get them to them, right? So the nutrient vessel, the ingredient, is just a way of getting those essential elements into your body. So it can be meat, it can be pea protein, it can be whatever. It can be yeast protein in what we use as a primary source in our dog food. So the body then immediately breaks down these nutrient vessels. As I say, they unload the good stuff, the nutrients, and then utilize that. So in no way, if you are providing the nutrients that your cat or your dog or yourself needs, no way are you depriving them of anything. In fact, you're only supporting good health. So I hope that helps, out there. But I'm just really, Julia, how often we are attacked, right? And so I really want us as animal advocates to be super aware of how our language and the framework, because it does, as a veterinarian, I'm constantly trying to overcome these biases, right? These misconceptions of even my colleagues. And so, we are no way depriving them. In fact, what we're actually trying to do is give them more of the nutrients that your dog, your cat, yourself needs for a healthy life.
Right.
Yeah.
I just hear all the time, with cats, you have to be more careful, right? And I actually heard some stories where people did it wrong, right? And then these are so exposed in media, right? Oh, you can do it so wrong, torturing this cat being vegan, right? But with dogs, it's so much easier. And then I think people are a bit scared, right? When they have their own cat to really do it
And Julia,
wrong?
they should be, because quite frankly, we haven't had good animal protein-free cat foods, right? There's only a handful in the entire world for the exact reasons that you just laid out. It's very difficult to source non-animal sources of certain nutrients. And so we and others are actively pursuing this research. We are very, very close to making some, we believe, some significant breakthroughs. And so I think you're going to see these products for cats coming online over the next couple of years, okay? If not sooner. Some of the hurdles that we have to overcome, quite frankly, are just regulatory. The regulations are really old and archaic, and they haven't kept up with food technology over the past decade. So, Shane and Julia, what many people fail to realize is that a lot of the progress that we are making in plant-based foods like Beyond and Impossible really is just an improvement on existing foods, right? So like our dog food, every ingredient that we use in that dog food is what is considered by the FDA generally recognized as safe. That means that this stuff has been around for 40 or 50 years. These ingredients that we're using are well established. And all we've done is improve the efficiency, the concentration, and ultimately the nutritional value. So as we move forward in science and technology, it's just such an exciting time for cats. Like, it's almost here, so just hold back. But let me get back to this real quick thing about the omnivore-carnivore dilemma. And I spend a chapter in the Clean Pet Food Revolution sort of working with my co-authors on why these terms are irrelevant, archaic, outdated, and quite frankly, meaningless. And really all they do is serve to divide us, because people are like, oh, they're carnivores, oh, they're omnivores, oh, they're herbivores. And honestly, those terms were originating in the mid-1800s, right? This is Linnaeus time. So what they were trying to do, biologists of the 1860s, were trying to say, we need to categorize biology. We are learning more about the world. We have microscopes. We have all these tools now. So we want to categorize it. But if you're sitting in a dark library in England and you're trying to describe what a tiger eats or needs, right, you're going to rely on skeletons, on the anatomy that you can observe, on pictures, on field reports from people that had actually been to Africa. And this led these early biologists to falsely categorize certain animals on their diet needs based on skeletal functions, right? So they were looking at their skull and they go, wow, a bear and a lion look a lot alike. They got these big fangs. Well, they must eat meat, because we know that, we have reports of these tigers taking down gazelles and whatever, right? And unfortunately, that's completely wrong, because as we know today, bears can eat on a wide variety. They're true omnivores. In fact, bears get their energy to hibernate from berries. Right. Before, they don't stock up. Now, of course, they eat salmon and other things, but they're omnivorous. Raccoons, right? I mean, we can go down the list of animals, panda bears, right, that are categorized as falsely as carnivores. And so I think that we really have to let go of these terms and look at the nutrient requirements, which is why I always go back to, it is about the nutrients. It is about the nutrients. We have this thing called an ingredient bias, and this is just a byproduct of our upbringing and experience, right? We tend to think that meat imparts certain things, and it's associated with health and vitality and strength and building muscles. It's not the meat. It's the amino acids that are contained within the meat that the body unlocks and then accesses to grow muscles, right? So we really need to elevate the language. We need to elevate our thinking and understanding and say, look, it's not actually the ingredient, it's actually what's in that, and that allows us to now more specifically and precise prescribe nutrition. So it's really exciting. But again, I want us to realize that if you want to use these terms, dogs and people are clearly omnivores. They can survive on a wide variety of ingredients, and cats are a little bit more towards the carnivorous route, meaning that it's more difficult for us to source. And again, the hiccup here is government regulation and just sourcing, scaling it up. It is very expensive. We could produce some of these foods today if the regulations would allow us, but they would be very expensive. So we're kind of waiting. A lot of things have to happen. It's super exciting if you're a plant-based person, because the costs are coming down, availability is broadening. I mean, it's almost here for cats.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. It's really exciting.
Yeah. So how did you start your vegan journey? Just get into personal talks.
Yeah, no, and I like this very much. I mean, I grew up in South Georgia, and so there's really two things that impacted me greatly as a young man. And the first is, of course, I grew up with fried chicken and ribs and pork chops and all that stuff.
Tex-Mex,
bacon.
all the Southern comfort foods, right?
Exactly, because that was my family. And remember, too, I'm coming from a farming environment, so we had chickens and cows and pigs, right? So, this is what I'm living with. But when I was 7, there's something very traumatic. I lost a dog horribly, and you can read it online. I've shared this story multiple places. But that was the time when I was 7 years old. I said, I'm going to be a vet. I'm going to take care of animals. I'm not going to allow them to die needlessly, because I was involved with this. 2 farmers, my dog got shot for allegedly killing chickens. And so
ouch.
That was the point. So now you're going and you're growing up, but you're 10 years old, you're 12 years old, you're 14 years old. You don't control the grocery store. You don't get to cook the meals. So you kind of go along with it. I'm unsettled. And at that time, you have to realize this is in the 70s and early 80s. And, my parents were like, when I was like, do we need to eat bacon? And they're like, well, yeah, you have to eat bacon or you won't grow up. You'll die. You'll be stunted or whatever.
Yeah, right.
All that nonsense. And it's okay, right? You're a kid, so you don't have the power to actually refuse. I guess I could have gone on a hunger strike, but I wasn't like that. I wasn't that awoke at the time.
Right.
But anyway, so then when I went off to college, 2 things happened. Number one, I watched both of my grandfathers die prematurely due to heart cardiovascular disease. Okay, so it's like, wow. And then when you start to explore further, like their fathers, my great-grandfathers, they also died of heart attacks. And wait, their fathers also died of heart attacks. So suddenly I'm realizing, holy smokes, there's a pattern here. Right. I don't want to be that guy, right?
Right.
So I'm going off to college. So that was the first thing. The second thing was I was finally able to control my own diet. And I was like, I'm not going to eat my friends anymore. It was literally that simple. It was like, wow, whatever they were eating and how they were living, I'm not going to smoke and drink excessively, and I'm not going to, I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do all those things. And at the same time, ethically, I feel much more comfortable. And I was really fortunate. I met my wife, and we're still together in 1986, and she was completely on board with this as well. We both had the same feelings, towards compassion, towards animals, and really towards all beings. We're kind of that type of person. And so, we just began it. Luckily, she is a phenomenal cook. So of course we raised our 2 daughters, they've never eaten animals. And so, it's a really wonderful way to have spent, most of my adult life since 1986. But then, what was really tragic for me was when I got into veterinary school, my father, again, having grown up and having the same genes as his father, wound up having, open heart surgery. And so that was really solidified it for me. I was like, I'm definitely on the right path. I did convert him before he passed, so after he had his heart attack and open heart surgery, he didn't have a full-blown heart attack. He had like a almost full-blown. And regardless, he became more plant-based. And so I'm really happy that, he did find his heart. He later succumbed to cancer, which was a completely different thing. But, so that's really it. And I think that for me, there are 2 types of advocates, right? So most of my professional career, and I've been very fortunate to write and lecture all around the world at all the major vet conferences at most of the veterinary schools, in the country. And so for me, it's one of those things where I live by example. I give a lot of health and wellness talks, and, you just sort of subtly drop it in there. You say, hey, it's much healthier to ditch the meat. And then, of course, there's other advocates that are, going to be a little more vocal and forward. But I think whatever you're doing in your plant-based journey, just, be aware that people are watching you, right? You're leading by example. And so I think it's very, very important for people like us to say, make sure that, we are living that good example so that people can learn and hopefully improve their own well-being.
Yeah, you're the
great said.
Legend already from the story I hear, you even raised your 2 daughters vegan, that's amazing. Because that's also not that easy.
Yeah. And they're becoming advocates, they're off, they don't live at home anymore. They're off at school. And they really, you can tell that these types of messages landed well. And so as a parent, I think Laura and I, my wife and I are really, really proud of that because they see injustice in the world and they speak out, and again, not just animal issues, but, just humanity issues. And of course, we're seeing tremendous things with racism and Black Lives Matter. And I'm really proud to see my daughters now actually, taking that next step in advocacy.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what inspired you to create Wild Earth? You just decided one day, nothing good out there. Let's make something.
My dogs need something yummier.
Or was there like a story behind it? Did you have, pets and you're wanted to make sure? All right, we'd love to hear it then. Of course, always a story.
More amazing stories.
So imagine, I'm living my entire life as what I perceive to be the good guy. I'm not a part of the problem. I'm not contributing to climate change. I'm not, causing the inhumane treatment of animals. Heck, I don't support factory farming. I do everything against that, right? I always viewed myself as the good guy in this dilemma. And the sad thing is, like most veterinarians and quite frankly, most pet parents, I was ignorant to the impact that pet food manufacturing was having on the climate and animal welfare, right? It was just one of those things that hadn't really considered, you know? And so in 2017, a research paper was published that changed the trajectory of my life, why I wrote this book, why we started this company, why I'm now much more openly advocating for ending, factory farming and animal meat consumption. Greg Oken and his team at UCLA published a paper that examined the contributions to greenhouse gas emissions by pet food manufacturing in the U.S. Again, I'm thinking, I'm the good guy here, right? I'm not part of the problem. I'm the solution. If everybody just lived like me and my family, we'd be fine.
Right.
But in his research, Oken uncovered and proved that 25 to 30% of the total greenhouse gas emissions in the United States were directly linked and caused to pet food manufacturing. Further, Oken's research concluded that about 25% of all animal meats created, produced, slaughtered in the United States were being eaten by dogs and cats. 30 pounds of fish were being eaten by domestic cats, our friendly indoor cats, a year. That's more than twice what the average U.S. American adult eats. So suddenly now, this paper lands, it's published. I am no longer the good guy in this story, right? I'm now part of the problem. Right. And it was an awakening. So this is in 2017, the beginning of it. And by the end of 2017, Wild Earth was launched. So a lot of other things, of course, great, serendipitous. Ryan Bethencourt, who is our CEO, and I were both presenting at a veterinary innovation conference. And so a lot of people sort of said, hey, you guys should get together. You guys are kind of talking about the same things. I think, it'd be beneficial. And honestly, it was just a, sprint from there on. And so I think that in life, there are several things that, and wherever you are in your personal journey that will tip you and nudge you in a certain direction. And the first thing is, always be open-minded, like always be aware of what's happening, because don't think that, like in my story, that, I could have gone on being oblivious to the damages that I was actually inadvertently, contributing to. So be open-minded. The second thing is be willing to change and adapt. So now I started to say, wait a second. Okay, Ernie, you've sort of been this quiet advocate for all of these years and it served you well, but now somebody has pointed research in your face that says you're a lot more culpable than perhaps you've considered yourself. Speak up, and so that's why we've done lots of other things, not just the clean pet food revolution and not just Wild Earth, but, my advocacy is now extending, much more openly. Right.
And are you wanting to make also wet food for pets? Because now it's more dry food, right?
Oh, yes. So again, we're a startup, and so that means that we have very limited resources. That means that, we do go on shows like Shark Tank to try to ask people like Mark Cuban to invest in us, So we are right at the, this is the first early stages. You have to realize, and sometimes I guess I have to sit back and check myself. Our dog food was only launched last August of 2019. Wow. So, this is a sprint.
Sure.
And really, Julia, to get back to the cat question, like all of those things, we're deep in the research and development stage. It's just a lot of other things, have to come in. You have to pass a lot of different regulations and testing and so forth. And so, these are slower processes, and really cost is a barrier. To really make the food that I want to make, this is a challenge to get it at a cost affordable price. And, and like you said, like I want to have canned food. I want to have fresh food. All of those things are coming. It's just a matter of cost. And then for us as a company to be able to actually afford and sustain, because, this is, and I'm sure everybody who's listening or watching this can relate. This is a weird time. Right?
It is, right?
There's been some hiccups for us, and, we've kind of like had to really reevaluate and re-strategize because, COVID has really changed how we interact with our customers, how we conduct R&D, how we discover new things. I mean, it's really changed it from a lab perspective as well.
We need to adapt here again, right?
Yeah.
It's like we constantly have to adapt, It's like the evolution is never ending, Like some people think, but we used to be like the prey or whatever and hunting and doing all
for
these
thousands
things.
of years we didn't wear masks and have a coronavirus running around.
Right.
So that doesn't help now, does it? Right. Totally. So we got to evolve. I feel like people are stuck in old traditions and old ways, and they're going to be left behind. We got to move forward, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're saying that's a really good point, because this is a natural, evolutionary, adaptive part of the process. I mean, there have to be upheavals, tumultuous changes, right? I mean, without an asteroid striking the planet, the planet Earth, that is, hundreds of millions of years ago, the dinosaurs probably would not have gone extinct the way they did, which would not have led to our development. So there's a lot of things that, like right now, obviously this is a horrible, tragic, unprecedented pandemic. We all are stressed and fearful. I mean, I'll be honest, for me, every day it's like, wow, am I going to interact with someone who might transmit this to me? And I have an elderly mother that I care for, right? So, it's frightening. But the point is, this is part of humanity. This is part of history. And as long as we can somehow stick together and continue to be progressive, I mean, we're going to get through this. We'll be stronger, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
I agree on that.
Yeah. So I got a question that's personal. My sister's dog has arthritis. He's virtually allergic to all animal products.
By default.
So he's vegan by default, but she wanted us to ask you, what would you feed a dog who has arthritis?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We just conducted, and we've published on our website at wildearth.com, the analysis. We asked over 3,000 of our customers who'd been feeding our plant-based, Wild Earth dog food for several months. So since we launched, we just said, hey, what are you seeing? What are the health benefits? And joint health, incidentally, was one of the top benefits that they saw. And I think, you mentioned a really important part. By eliminating animal meat, we're probably not only reducing allergies like your sister's dog has, but also inflammation, right? I mean, there's well established, you've had numerous guests who've talked about the pro-inflammatory aspects of red meats. So I think that lowering the the inflammatory threshold actually helps tremendously. The other thing is we added, and again, part of this formulation for me was to, I kind of got to do my dream formulation here, but we added high levels of omega-3 fatty acids, DHA. And so if I'm giving that advice to your friend or your sister, it's to make sure that you are using an anti-inflammatory diet whenever possible. I always am going to lean towards, of course, plant-based for dogs. And then the second thing is to really boost omega-3s, because it's the ratio in the body of omega-6s, which primarily are from plants, particularly like corns and things like that. And then to omega-3s, which we use an algal source. And if you're, when people say, what's your desert island supplement? For me, it's always going to be algal DHA. I've been taking this for 30 plus years. And so my point is that you really want to do things that reduce inflammation. So boost it, add additional DHA. That's a really easy thing to do. And then, of course, as it progresses, it's really important for pet owners, especially dog owners, not to ignore the early subtle signs of osteoarthritis, because you are going to wind up having to use most likely a prescription anti-inflammatory, because what's happening if that joint is painful, it's inflamed. And when there's inflammation, we're denuding the subchondral bone, which is actually this covering of the joint surface. And if we allow that inflammation to persist, then of course we just accelerate the demise of the bone and the joint worsens, and it's a vicious cycle. So ultimately I wind up breaking that cycle with the use of pharmacology.
Right.
So you can actually improve it, although like the arthritis is so got so bad in a way? So
it depends. it's great. So there's no cure and you don't reverse it. That's why it's so important to initiate and intervene early, because as the inflammation persists in that joint, it's just denuding, it's just breaking down. And what you wind up having literally is a joint that becomes now, we sometimes even refer to this as gristle. It's just raw bone on raw bone, which is intensely painful. And I always tell people, if you want to know what this feels like, talk to somebody who's had a knee or hip replacement, and they will most likely tell you about their excruciating pain experience prior to surgery.
Oh, crazy. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I'll have to tell my sister to give him some algal oil. Some omega-3s. Yeah.
And get his,
or maybe hemp oil, or does it have to be like an algal oil? Could it be another like source of omega-3 like flax or ALA?
Yeah, it was a really good question. So when you look at the omega-3s, you definitely are going to wind up using an algal source. When you look at flax and others, those oxidize so rapidly that unless it's freshly ground, especially flax or something, which is the richest, going to be a plant source, it's going to oxidize and then of course it's not going to be bioavailable. And so that's why we tend to lean towards pure sources of DHA. And just remember, this is the algae. That's where the fish get their DHA, which is why people use fish oils, right? So just go to the source. It's sort of like eat like the elephants, right?
Yeah.
So go to the source.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you feed your dog on a regular basis? Do you feed him your wild earth, or do you give him some fruits and vegetables, some peppers? I know some dogs like watermelon.
I heard you feed them like smoothies too, right? When you have
So you're right.
Awesome.
So my base diet, and my two dogs, I'm proud to say they're Border Terrier rescues. They have been eating wild earth longer than any dog on the planet, which is kind of a remarkable thing to be able to say.
That's awesome.
You can imagine they went through several prototypes, iterations, so they've been eating this since the early days. And again, what's really remarkable is we continue to do a really big battery of tests to watch everything, because I want to make sure that my dogs are in tip-top shape. Right. But I love what you said there, Julia, about supplementing. And you're right. My absolute favorite go-to, sweet potatoes, right? I mean, that is one of nature's superfoods. So if you're looking for a summer delight for your dog, don't hesitate. Share some sweet potatoes. That is absolutely, you can't go wrong. Great for digestion.
Or cooked?
I prefer cooked for sure.
Raw might be pretty hard to eat, even for humans.
Exactly right. Some eat
it
it raw,
enhances the digestibility. Yeah,
exactly.
Oh,
and for your cat, what do you feed your cat?
Yeah, this is where we wind up with the ethical feeding friction, because I'm not happy with any of the current vegan options. So we do a combination of home prepared meals for her, and we do have to supplement it with fish proteins. It is an awful concession, but I'm the first to admit it. I'm not happy, which is why I'm so actively researching and working on bringing a better solution, because I just don't think that we've had a really, what I would consider an adequate feline plant-based diet. Like I'm not satisfied with it. So again, it's a concession every day when I feed, itty bitty kitty, which is her name. I feel that, but I feel that tinge of guilt because I just don't have a better solution for her right now. Not one. And I'll be also very frank with you guys. According to my wife, at least, this is probably our last cat, because she's just really can't do it anymore. And Itty Bitty Kitty is almost 15. So she grew up with our daughters, right? So this was kind of their cat. In fact, they actually found her. So she came from a gas station. Yes, it's long. Everybody's got those stories of rescues. But so they brought Itty Bitty into our life. She's a lovely, lovely cat. But, again, my wife in particular, she's like, and so you can imagine I'm really trying to ramp up my efforts, because I want another cat after Itty Bitty, but my wife is like, unless you can solve it, I can't do it. And that's legit, right? That is totally legit.
Fair enough. Yeah.
It is. Well, you will achieve that goal.
Yeah.
We believe in you.
You can do it.
Yeah.
We know it. It'll come soon.
Oh, we will. Yeah. I have utmost confidence. Yeah, I will say this. It is kind of a drumbeat from Ryan and myself. So Ryan Bethencourt, the CEO, I don't know that a week goes by that we don't push somebody in our research department to say, all right, wait, can we do this? What about that? Have you thought of that?
Right. Yeah. And like you said, it's all about just getting the proper nutrients. Just got to figure out how to get them, right? So,
Yep.
I mean,
regulation and cost.
Exactly. We can send someone to the moon. I'm sure we can figure out, how to decompose or like break down and grab what we need out of stuff, right?
And one thing too, just to be aware, and I apologize, but I think you have an audience that this resonates with and understands, but we are up against considerable market forces. The agriculture lobby is strong and deep and persistent, and they yield considerable influence. In the book, The Clean Pet Food Revolution, I kind of go into the details of how ag-gag laws really prevent you from understanding what ventilation shutdown is, for example, one of the things I'm really fighting against right now. And how they slow down progress, right? So look at what they've done with nut milks, right? So almond milk isn't milk, soy milk isn't, all this nonsense. But it slows down progress. Right. So you have to be aware that when people like us are working through the regulatory process, we are having to work within rules that are designed to slow us down. And so, a lot of people are like, why don't you just do it now? It's like, well, we could, but we probably would get it pulled off the market immediately, right? Because they would sue us. Some other, group or industry would come out, and this is what's happened. You've seen this with other plant-based options, and so we have to be thoughtful and methodical, and remember that pet food now is a significant profit center for agriculture. So we are now saying, wait a second, we think that maybe you shouldn't be making money killing animals to feed dogs and cats, and that's not always a well-received message.
Exactly. All these animal byproducts make our pets sick as well. So many cats, especially, they get diabetes when they get older. I don't think that's normal. No, not at all. And when we look at the number of recalls in pet foods, they're almost always centered around the animal protein. So, this is I think it's kind of a well-known problem, but, until you can offer a solution, I think sometimes it's pointless to make a big fuss about, there's a problem, but no, I can't fix it. So, one of the reasons that we were so passionate, because, look, I'm coming at it from an animal welfare, climate change perspective. But at the same time, I'm also deeply concerned about the health of pets. I've even mentioned to you that my own concerns with feeding my cat certain commercial plant-based cat foods, right? So I had to make sure that not only were these the most humane and compassionate and cruelty-free foods, but they were also the most healthy and nutritious. And of course, that's why we went with dogs. That's why the formulation is very specific and precise. My 20 years of research and work in pet obesity really, it's kind of funny that, when you're along the journey of life, and I'm far enough along that journey to be able to speak now with a considerable experience, you start to realize, wow, these are steps and they do lead someplace, right? And so I think it's really, wherever you are in your journey in life, it's very important to realize that every day, if you're trying to make progress and move something forward, you're probably going to wind up, miles ahead, and you're going to look back and go, wow, okay, that made sense that I started doing that research on pet obesity 20 years ago, right? Because that led me to understanding protein physiology and understanding that, hey, we can get those same amino acids from plants or yeast, and it is healthier and better.
Yeah, right. I think we take for granted the little steps that we've taken over the years, like even at elementary school, or learning how to count, or do simple math that we use every day, right? But normal kids won't know it unless you get taught it. So it's amazing how these little steps just add up to where we are today and how we evolve and keep moving forward and learning more, right?
Yep, and I do think that this also, we are people that are younger than you, that are even perhaps younger than my kids, that are, just now about to enter into their 20s. They're growing up in a world that is less hands-on experiences and more virtual. And I don't really know how that plays out, right? We've really tried to make sure, and your generation, you've had a lot of very good physical experiences, notwithstanding the current pandemic. But we try to supply those experiences for our children. But a lot of people around the world are starting now to focus on the screens in front of them, and there's value to that. Don't get me wrong, but I do wonder how, like you said, those little baby steps along the life journey. How are they going to, where will they lead, and what are those steps? And, I'm an eternal optimist. I think it's just going to change the way people think and behave and act and live. But, at the end of the day, it's also something that we need to be cautious about and make sure that we are supplying rich, meaningful experiences that can profoundly impact the future.
Right. So true. Yeah, like I always say, it's always ordered chaos. Everything in the universe is all chaotic, and we don't know what's going on, but it all is ordered into a certain pattern, to where we are today, right? If things weren't so in line, we probably wouldn't be here today. So it's crazy.
Right. Second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. So why is it important for dogs to wear a harness instead of a leash? Is it just because you're pulling on their neck type thing, or is it just way better for their back and everything in general?
Shane, the number of tracheal and throat injuries that I've seen in my career are significant. I think most veterinarians that have been in practice. So you're absolutely right. It's when that little dog or that big dog, you're out on the walk and they see a squirrel or another dog or another person and they leap or lurch out. It's that immediate concentration of force. The dynamics here are significant. And so it causes damage. Yeah. So we like walking halters because, again, it distributes that pressure, that force over a larger part of the body. And of course, obviously the truncal area is going to be, the core is the strength of the body. So we know that you will A, have better control over your dog, and B, it's very difficult to injure your dog like that. And I'll tell you, you might have seen, there was a viral video about a lady, a white lady who called the cops
New York.
on a black, and
Central
on a black
Park.
burger, which was just outrageous. But in the video, what caught my eye and my wife's eye immediately was her jerking the dog, right?
Like lifting the dog off the ground by like the collar.
That's
the
awful.
Neck. Yeah, it's nuts.
It's awful. So, again, that's a horrible example and a bit out of context. But if you want to see the types of force dynamics that I'm alluding to, that's really an excellent example. Horrible situation. Yeah. But, the reality is you can instantly see because if your dog pulls off, and you see them, you're like, I'm out for runs and I see these people with these retractable leashes, which I think should be banned. But anyway, the dog's 20 foot in front of them. They have, when you think about the physics of it, they have no control. The force dynamics at the end of that leash are tremendous. So this dog snaps off, rears, pulls back, it rears them back. I mean, Shane, come on. No.
Yeah, not good.
Right? I see
collars are great.
They should ban them. They should ban them.
But so many people are still wearing them.
I would say 2/3 of the people I see are wearing, with the neck collar one instead of a harness.
Here in Vancouver, a lot.
It's convenience, right? It's convenience. And so I think people then also think, well, my dog he's not going to lurch like that. I'm not going to string him up like that. Of course, you're probably not. But if it happens, it happens. And I will tell you, as a veterinarian, there's very little we can do to repair that site because, these are really, when they do tear the trachea, the tracheal rings collapse. Right. That is nearly impossible. There are some biosynthetic, cartilaginous rings that are used in people, but imagine it's a Chihuahua. Imagine it's a 10 kilogram dog. It's very, very challenging.
Yeah. So Ernie, why do you think they're still on the market, the collars?
They're cheap. And look, my dogs have very stylish collars, so we like that. That's what their ID band is on. They're microchipped, of course, but I will say this. My wife would tell you that she doesn't want them running around naked, right? So a bit of a style element. But when we walk them, walking requires the harness. So there's two different situations, right? Okay. There's one, my normal dog collar. That's just how we've raised Harry and Jenny from Harry Potter, if you're wondering.
Nice.
But then they have walking harnesses. They have swim vests, right? So they have all these other tools that allow them to go out and engage in physical activity with us. So it's just, again, it's just a matter of, come on, I do water sports, I do cycling, running, all those things, right? Mm-hmm. We have gear that we put on or use for those specific sports. When you walk your dog, you put on a harness. Simple.
Fair enough.
That makes sense.
Yeah, more people need to get a harness for their dogs for sure, and cats too. I would assume same thing, right?
Yes.
For sure.
They have great walking harnesses.
Or humans, anyone. You don't want to be probably pulling them by the neck, right? So it doesn't really make logical sense, but you know.
Exactly. And Shane, it's kind of funny, in nearly 30 years of practice, I've had maybe a couple of cat owners who really were able to train their cat to walk on a harness. It can be done. It's a beautiful thing to witness, but
I've seen it a couple times in Vancouver, definitely.
I see that quite a lot.
Actually, I've seen it quite a lot. And I'm like, is that a cat with a harness and they're walking it? Because you don't normally see cats with any type of leash or harness. They're pretty independent. They don't like that stuff at all. So
we tried it with Itty Bitty when she was young. Didn't go over so well. She doesn't wear a harness.
Do you have a stroller for your pets?
Yeah, some people have strollers.
I do not.
You're way too active to have a stroller, I think.
Yeah, you would think that would make them not as active and maybe,
Sometimes they're sick, though. I think they use that
Yeah,
too,
I would.
right?
Yeah, for sure.
But sometimes I think that's torture. Like dogs need to move, right? They need to run. If they're home all the time, that's not good for them.
Yeah,
I agree. I want them to engage in physical activity as often and frequently as possible.
Right.
We're not meant to sit. So, what are some good snacks to feed your dogs and cats and pets?
Yeah, my absolute favorite go-to and Harry and Ginny's staple, baby carrots. Dogs like crunchy things, so baby carrots are easy. I find myself snacking on them. I see my girls snacking on them. They're all home now for the pandemic, going to school online.
Right.
But, so baby carrots, easy, inexpensive, and the vast majority of dogs, in my experience, love them. And then I go into things like celery, broccoli. I slice a lot of cucumbers. We're a big cucumber family here. So they love sliced cucumbers. That's another great summertime refreshing. Remember, cucumbers are just full of water. They're probably 80+% water. And so nice hydrating, summer thing. In fact, another little secret is if you take the cucumbers, put them in the freezer or the refrigerator, it's a nice refreshing, cooling summer snack. You can also put any of these in ice tray cubes, right? Super inexpensive. And so if your pup's outside and it's hot, you can kind of give them one of these to lick on, and then they get we call them ice surprises, right?
Nice, like a popsicle for your pet, sort of.
Yeah.
Water
I'm
popsicle.
A big fan of broccoli as well. We know it's an immunomodulator. It helps activate the cytochrome P450, which is essential for cellular metabolism. So I do like broccoli. I mean, people say, oh, wouldn't it give the dog gas? I guess if you gave them an excessive amount, but a couple of florets, a couple of heads, you're fine. My dogs love chewing on the stalks, but again, whatever your dog, I think broccoli is a great, zucchini. I think I might have mentioned celery. I like crunchy vegetables. I prefer those because again, dogs seem to be very satiated with that crunching. So,
right.
Yeah.
And are there any cool snacks for cats they like too?
Yeah, this is where we sort of run out of options quickly. My cat personally likes some dried sweet potatoes, so we dehydrate sweet potatoes.
Oh, cool.
And so as a snack for us and our dogs, but that's a little more work. But she does like that. I would say your results may vary, but then you're kind of back to animal meat products. So I guess if you're gonna do that, try to find wild caught, salmon or tuna or something. I don't even like to say tuna, but anyway,
I heard like cats even like chickpeas, with dolls sprinkled.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Some like garbanzo or chickpeas. My cat does not. And what I will say this is, if you're eating dinner or you're preparing a meal and you notice that your cat gets curious because their sense of smell is so heightened, and they do tend to like more savory types of aromas, and which is incidentally why a lot of cats try to eat our dog food, because that umami from the yeast proteins, that savoriness, I think a lot of cats are like, wow, that's pretty appealing. Right. But if you notice that happening when you're making something in the house, just offer a little bit to your cat and see what they make of it. Make sure it's not too hot or too cold. Cats do like certain temperature preferences. But my point is that just don't, be open-minded, explore, and you might find. We had a cat years ago that would lick coffee. Freddie cat. His name was Freddie Krueger because he had 25 toes. He was a wonderful cat. But he would, if I had my coffee mug and put it down for more than 2 seconds, he would hop up and take advantage. Yeah.
Is that your special kind of cat coffee?
Like they feed him the cat, what is it?
Oh, the civet. Oh, that's
the civet cat one. And then,
that one's nasty. Oh.
Thank you for saying that.
That
I was
seems
hoping
weird.
Go in that direction.
Yeah. This seems so unnecessary for whatever reasons, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. And then, of course, this time of year, watermelon is always, because we're cracking open watermelon. So watermelon is, dogs love it, low calorie, hydrating. So, a lot of the melons, our dogs like those as well. And they're great. With fruits like berries and bananas and even apples, they are calorically dense. So we have to be cautious with the amount, right? So you don't want to give large servings. But the reality is those are great in moderation. So if I'm having an apple, I'm very likely I'm going to give a slice to each of my dogs, and they love it, but I'm not going to give them half of the apple, which would be too many calories for them.
Why is it a problem for dogs?
For gaining weight, for obesity.
Although they're that active, it can still happen.
Well, again, it depends on how active they are. In our study,
probably how big, right? How big
what's that?
How big the pet is, right? How big the dog is. Like obviously a bigger dog is going to need more calories than like a small little Chihuahua type thing, right? So
exactly. Yeah. So it's, this is why kind of having a good idea of how many calories your dog should be fed each day. And you can go to petobesityprevention.org. We have lots of calculators and different scales and ways you can kind of get an idea. But again, working with your veterinarian, we use something called the body condition score. And then we look at their age and their sex and previous or existing medical conditions. And then we can give you a more precise caloric count for each day. And it's really important, I think, for most pet owners to have an idea. It doesn't mean that you have to count calories every meal or every treat or snack that you give, but you should have an idea. Are you getting close to that limit, each day? And I think that's one of the ways to build awareness and not just, again, mindlessly give your dog, whatever you're eating.
Right. Yeah. They look at you so cute, though. You're like, I have to give a little bit, though.
They look so hungry. They look like their eyes are bigger than their stomachs, and they just want it all, right?
Right.
That's right. And this is where being good pet parents comes into play. And, you have to sometimes tell your kid, because I used to always tell vets in my lectures, look, if you give any child on the planet the choice between a bowl of chocolates and a bowl of kale, you're going to find that about 99.9% of the children choose the bowl of chocolates. That doesn't mean it's a good idea. It's not going to be healthy or nutritious. So, as parents, sometimes you have to go, you got to have the kale or the spinach or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. You got to guide them, right? They don't really understand.
Exactly.
What they're doing.
Julie's like, oh no,
but I wanted to give them a whole watermelon.
I just love the crunch of how satisfying it is for them.
It's very satiating to watch them eat.
I don't know.
Not satiating, satisfying. It's very satisfying watching dogs eat watermelon and crunch. I don't know.
Yeah, like that sound of it.
Yeah, I just like watching it. It's weird.
I don't know. It's different than when you see someone else eating, but when you see a dog really they actually really appreciate every bite you give them because they know they can't eat all the time, right?
Yeah, they can't just go to the store or I want this one day. They really appreciate it when you give it.
What's amazing is you two, the emotions that you're expressing and sharing are tapping into 30, 40,000 years of coexistence and coevolution, because that exact feeling and response has been learned and earned over thousands and thousands of years of feeding dogs. And so that's why they do pull on our heartstrings. That's why we do feel this emotional connection with food and love. And so, it's just an expression of that relationship. Having said that, we live in a world of abundance, and therefore it's very easy to overexpress that love. And so we want to be cautious and make sure that we are mindful of.
So where can the listeners find you if they want to know more about your book and other stuff?
Yep. Yeah, for the dog food, wildearth.com. You can certainly learn more about me at drernieward.com. That's DRERNIEWARD.com. Clean Pet Food Revolution is also a great website you can check out, and check it out on Amazon or at your local bookstores. But again, for me, it's just about, connecting on social media, whatever. I'm at Dr. Ernie Ward, DRERNIEWARD. Wherever you are, I'm there. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, you can name it.
Perfect.
Amazing. Wow. You're such an inspiring person. You and your whole family, just like your journey. And you have such a unique niche, that it's still not enough information out there, I find, for people. Vegan, but even pets are a bit more as I mentioned before, hesitant, right? So we're so impressed and honored, that we have you on our show. And
we appreciate the time and the clarity.
And the information, you simplified it so well for people to understand it better, because scientific background, it's sometimes hard to make it simple, to explain it simply, right? But because it's so complex.
And definitely check out this book, shameless plug, because I tried to clarify even more and really go into the hard science of it. There are about 26 pages of scientific citations. So, my editor is like, can you not write a paragraph without a scientific study? And I was like, nope, that's how I work. Yeah, so really, really happy. It's also co-written with a dear friend of mine, an animal ethicist from the UK, Alice Oven. She did remarkable work, really helping put together, some of these thoughts and ideas and really helping, keep it all reined in. And then Ryan Bethencourt contributed as well, who's our CEO.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, sounds great. We'll have to check out that book.
Yeah, thanks again for your time, and it's been an honor to have you.
Yeah.
And keep on doing what you're doing. Amazing impact to the whole world.
Well, thank you. And I hope everybody stays safe. And if you have a dog or cat, give them a hug for me. I really, really appreciate that.
Aw.
Sounds great. We'll do that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, take care.
All right, Ernie. Take care, eh?
Bye.
Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, ciao.